Welcome back to my Golf Fantasy Podcast. I'm Ryan, that's Wendell, back on this week. And it's a good week. Came off the Valspar. Exciting finish to the end of that tournament. A couple guys really in the hunt there, and then one prevailed and the other one kind of faltered. So let's get started on that. Then we'll touch on the Houston Open. What'd you see in the tournament last week?
Yeah, Copperhead is it's a tough track. Proved again you gotta be an excellent ball striker here to play to do well. And even like a 3-day leader like Sung Jae Im, he wasn't safe on Sunday. He had a pretty big collapse there after leading every round through 54 holes, shooting plus 374 in the final round to fall out of contention to tie for fourth. Very great on Fitzpatrick. His ball striking was on here this weekend and won at -11, sealed the deal with a clutch birdie on 18. The last couple we've looked at has been, tournaments that have finished on 17, 18 with some pretty dramatic one finishes, birdies, bogeys, double bogeys. And this one was nothing short of another dramatic win here for Fitzpatrick. So that bogey-free final round 68 definitely catapulted him in there and got him the W.
Actually, I quickly want to touch on that. Like some of the finishes this year, especially in the last few weeks, have been very, very good. And it has been the more veteran, experienced players that are kind of climbing back into contention and finishing strong. And then they kind of maybe like not necessarily less experience or maybe like players who've had less time on tour this year, like Im as an example. I think it was his second tournament maybe. And can't finish. We had Hitsasune, earlier in the year, similar thing, couldn't finish. A couple guys just can't get over the finish line. And some of these like savvy vets, as young as Fitzpatrick is, he's been around quite a while now. At Morikawa a few weeks back, these guys are finishing strong, getting birdies or even eagles approaching the final holes. And this week was the same. Exact same thing happened. So, when we start looking at our lineups, you start kind of considering that, like, you got to have some of those savvy vets that have experience in pressure situations to make shots coming into the final holes in order to try to like capture a title, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. And it just kind of goes to show, like guys like Fitzpatrick, I mean, some of the stats here this week, it just kind of, for some of the picks that we have been being made in some of the strokes gain categories that we typically are looking at, like this guy, he was number one strokes gain tee to green for the week. Picked up 11 and a half strokes over the field throughout the week on tee to green. Number one in scrambling, got up and down 17 to 20 times throughout the week. I mean, it just reinforces, strokes gain approach, tee to green. That's kind of the winning formula here. And then you sprinkle in like your savvy vets, like you mentioned, guys who can handle the pressure, in the back nine coming through on Sunday. It's really proved to be a winning formula recently. And we even saw like this week too. I mean, some big names missed the cut. I mean, Victor Hovland, defending champ here, he missed the cut. Wyndham Clark, who I'll talk about here later. Maybe a controversial my guy pick, but Max Homa also, and Sahith Theegala, like those four guys who you thought were pretty much locks there last week to at least get into the weekend, blew up in some rounds where their ball striking wasn't on, and it hurt them, right? So
Yeah, and you bring up Tigala, and two of our stats this week or last week was strokes gained, tee to green. As much as that's everything, it's tee to green and scrambling were two of our main stats last week that we wanted to talk about, right? And the winner finishes first in both of those key stats. So like we kind of knew where the winner was going to come from, who was going to capitalize and take advantage of it. And now when you look at Tigala, and it's one of the reasons why I didn't take him last week, was that's not his game, right? And he scrambles pretty well, but his game is long off the tee and capitalizing on short par fours and long par fives, where he can, have a significant advantage over the field sometimes. And this course wasn't quite built for him, right? There was narrow fairways, tight greens. It was ball shaping. It wasn't a situation where those types of players could necessarily perform well. They can perform well, but typically they don't. And that was I think a classic example of someone like Tigala who couldn't perform well here this week. And because his shot making just wasn't, that elite, and you take the driver out of his bag and it becomes now harder for a guy like that. So
yeah,
let's get in. We'll get into my golf guy picks. It's embarrassing to have to show it, but we're gonna do it anyways. It was one of those weeks for us, and we haven't had one of those weeks in a while. But it was one of those weeks for us.
yeah. I mean, last time we both missed a cut was week 3.
Yeah, the farmers.
Alex Smollett and Taylor Pendrith. And so we both, both chose guys. Yours was a little bit more of a long shot than mine. I took Sahith, obviously, just based on his recent play. Like I liked his form, even though he wasn't a perfect setup for this course. Again, I was trying to take a guy that was, and I think the reason he was outside that kind of top 10, top 20, or top 15, and kind of like, projected to win this last week. He still was trending in the right direction. He was playing extremely well leading up to that tournament. Had some great performances, and so I said, well, why not take a guy who's trending in the right direction? If he gets the ball in play, I think he's going to be able to kind of at least produce. Sure enough, he goes out round one and fires a plus 677, and obviously. I knew right away that A, my guy obviously wasn't going to beat yours, and after that round, and B, my DFS lineup was going to be quite in quite a lot of trouble as well. So yeah, it wasn't an ideal performance for sure, and we're gonna have to rebound here
Yeah.
this week.
And I've said this early in the year, and I've said this through a ton of tournaments because I really am a big fan of Tagala, and watching him is so hard because he is could be very erratic. He'll pump one 320 yards, but 30 yards right of the fairway, right? And he scrambles well. He can get up and down from there. He can, do good things. But when his whole game isn't on, you get a performance like this. Whereas the week before, the guy finishes top 10 and played fantastic at the Players, and he, like you said, he was trending in the right direction. It's a true statement. Like, he definitely was one of the guys that was like, oh, coming off multiple top 25s in the last few weeks, and he walked into this one. And listen, he had a field that was, not as strong as some of the other fields he's been in, right? He's been playing premier events. So you'd think that he had the chance this week, and he just couldn't do it.
Yeah, I know like some people who listen to this probably might not be able to see the board here. They're tuning in on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. But and since we didn't actually have the episode last week because of some family stuff I was going through, but you took Jake Knapp back-to-back weeks. Is he now on your bench for good for the rest of the season, or where are you at with Jake Knapp?
Okay. I'm going to get into this later, but I'll touch on it right now, right? So the withdrawal means that he was, okay, withdrawal, I can still use him. In my head, I'm like, I can go back to him. And then he goes with the miscut. Now, he went withdrawal because of illness just before his tee time. Kind of pissed me off. But he was still top end playing, right? I think I took him too close with the Players after his illness, and he misses the cut. His first miscut, his first non-top 20 performance of the season in his 7th tournament, right? So I was like, okay, I caught him on a bad week. He's not on my bench yet. But if he goes and screws up again, yeah, I'm benching this guy. I mean, it's a situation where he's still such an elite player and hasn't really he came off the withdrawal plus the miscut after the illness. Maybe he wasn't 100%, right? I'm not going to fault the guy for that. But he's on the fence right now.
Well, I know you and I both, and we'll talk about this soon, but we both took him this week in our DFS plays. So
Yeah.
I think we both might have a sour taste in our mouth this week if he doesn't perform.
Well, we'll see. Listen, Taylor Moore this last week at the Valspar, I was so high. He was the defending champion coming in, and he had great course stats for this. I actually had him in my top 5 ranked players with all the course stats that I pulled together. And he shot a +2 opening round. Not great, but didn't pull him out of contention. And day 2 was a struggle for a lot of players.
Yeah.
And day 2, he puts up the +6 and just kind of knocked him out. Similar to Tagala, same concept. One bad round and you're never going to recover. And his second round was horrible. And I was relying on, he was low price in DraftKings. I thought I was getting a steal at the 7,500, and I'll get into that in a minute. But his 11 bogeys with only 3 birdies was such a detriment to him. He just couldn't make shots, and it's very not typical of Moore. He was top 10 in scrambling on tour leading up to the event. and what we saw, the guy who finished number one in scrambling this week was the winner. So I definitely thought he was a guy to pick, and he happened to be, just not on his game this week. So listen, you missed the cut, I missed the cut. There's, no, I don't take a loss, luckily, on this one because you failed as well as I did. So let's cut our losses and move on.
Agreed. Yeah, let's move on to the next segment here. Not enough talking about the guys who couldn't cut it for us.
So let's go into the DraftKings, what our lineups look like. And, you had a couple disappointments. And listen, since I won, I'm going to talk about my lineup first. Because I think I did well with Xander. Xander, we got top 5 finish. It was his second, third rounds was +1 even par. He struggled in these 2 rounds. Everybody struggled on day 2. So, it wasn't that much of a surprise. Leaderboard didn't really move that much. Guys fell. And, he had a bogey-free round on the Sunday, which really boosted up his DraftKings score. So my premier guy that I'm picking, and he gets 89 points. Nobody had, too many guys had exceeded 100 points here because of how challenging this course was. So it was a good performance. Histasune, funny, even par, -2, even par. He just didn't, have that round in him. If at all he puts up a -5, -6 in any of those rounds, he puts him in the top 5 as well. And that's what he just didn't have today or this week's. I still liked him, but definitely, for $8,600, 66 points isn't going to do it for you. The biggest disappointment of the week was Max Homa. You know how much I am off of Max Homa. And last week I decided I would give him a shot. He'd been playing very well, top 10s in 2 of his last 3 events. I was thinking, okay, maybe he's really turned it around, mentally, and he goes out and fires a +7 opening day. And right there, I was discouraged. I just stopped following him altogether. So that was disappointing. Patrick Rogers, I thought was a great value pick at the 7,600. He was coming off of multiple cuts made in a row. I think I don't even know if he's missed one all year. And he did okay. Round 2 +1, which hurt. Round 4 +1, which also hurt him. So, but he did fine. Tough double bogey, in the second round kind of hurt him. Taylor Moore already talked about 14 points out of somebody that you think is going to be an elite player in this course. Defending champion was killer. But Niergaard Peterson, that was a fun one. I've been eyeing this guy for a few weeks, and as much he finished 55th, right? And he finished +3 to end the tournament. He fired a -3 to start the tourney. It's interesting. 43 pars, 14 birdies, 15 bogeys, right? Like, this guy wasn't too high and he wasn't too low. And I think that was probably like the thing you maybe want to avoid when you're doing DraftKings. If you're going to want to win, you have to take some risks. And, you're going to mention on Tagala in a minute, and it didn't work out for you. But guys like that they're eagle performers. And sometimes risk of bogey, double bogey may be the guy you might want in some of these events in order to get high points, right? Niergaard Peterson, he just was very average at 56 points. Didn't do anything spectacular, but I really liked his game. He played well, for an event, and finished at 300 points. Very mediocre.
Yeah, Nick, you beat me by 35 points. Unfortunate, obviously. Like you said, I mean, your lineup was pretty solid. 2 guys missed the cut there. Had a few bad day 1s, quite a few bad day 2s. I think that's a trend that I'm going to talk about here as well. In my lineup, I guess I'll start with Justin Thomas. Obviously, he was my anchor. He was a guy that I was pretty high on, just kind of coming into this event for a number of reasons. Obviously, he came tied for 8th at the Players the week before. He was a guy that was really kind of trending in the right direction. Obviously, coming off a back surgery, but I liked his game for this course. He never really put it together and went low any specific day other than round 4, shot 68, ended up coming tied for 30th. Obviously, as we've mentioned so many times, you're going to pay $9,500 for a guy. You need him to come top 10. And JT just couldn't do it there for me last week. went with the good old Canadian boy Corey Connors as kind of my second anchor. He actually was the best performing guy in my group, coming tied for 14th. So really, I don't have to talk much more about anything else. If I tell you my best performing guy comes tied for 14th, it's not going to be it's not going to be a good lineup overall. So he shot -5. He was consistent, -2 round one, -2 round two, -1 round three, even par round four. Um, it was fine. If paying 9,000 as my second guy, I would be fine with that if the other guys performed, or if even I had some of the some of the bottom guys perform, that would have been an absolutely fine pick. But then we get into like Thigala, and yeah, he struggled. I mean, that first day, 77 plus six, had a double bogey, bunch of bogeys. He just really couldn't get together. And as you kind of already alluded to, I mean, the course setup really wasn't ideal for him, but really liked where his game was trending and thought that, hey, like this could be a guy that continues to put it together. He put some of his drives in in play, and he's really good around the greens. His approach, if he's able to kind of put it all together here again this week, like he has in previous weeks, he's gonna be fine. He's at least gonna make the cut. Never for a second did I think he was gonna miss the cut by as much as he did. I thought if anything, like, hey, I'm gonna pay 8,800, he's gonna make the cut come 30th. Like that's what I thought was worst case scenario, but he really, proved me wrong, and in a pretty poor missed cut in performance overall. Keegan Bradley, he was kind of a guy who I was just again, he was previously at this, he did well in this tournament. And I thought like for sure at 8,500, he was a guy going to be low owned, pretty good approach player, and somebody who, again, he's been a little bit inconsistent this year, but was still kind of high on. So, I thought he was going to miss the cut after his round one, shot +2, but shot a 69 -2 in round two. And then just kind of didn't do much over the weekend to come tie for 55th, a +1 overall. And then you talked already about day two struggles. Well, my two kind of bottom, two guys that are kind of piecing together my lineup who I liked, who their games fit well for the course, but they both had decent round one shooting, even par. In the round two, they blew up. Smin was +879 in round two, and Zach Blair was 76 +5. When you had three guys miss the cut, 265 points overall, it was a pretty bad DFS performance overall by my entire team. But yeah, can really only go up from here after that performance.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is when you look at it, like, a couple guys that really stand out that were low value and made a performance. One Lipsky, never had this guy on my radar
Mm.
and did very well. And the other one was Im, right? So the interest we talked about his, fourth round performance, but he still finished top almost 100 points, top five, and he was only $7,100 on DraftKings, right? And it was because he hadn't played up until the previous week, and he missed the cut that week. So, he didn't have any value on him, and 2.8% owned, right? Because people didn't have any hope in him, and he went out and did that. Still a fantastic golfer, right? Like everybody knows who he is, and he can play well, he can perform. So it's just like interesting, like that those low value guys can perform here, and we just didn't have them. Right. And then that's the interesting thing is like you got to pick those guys in order to perform. We know that. So, let's talk about this week though, and the Houston Open, and what's going to happen here. It's a very interesting track. Before we do that, just to update the leaderboard. I'm still
looking good for me.
Yeah, 130 points behind you on the DraftKings leaderboard. So let's talk about this week, and we'll see how well how many more points I can gain on you this week after finally gaining some this past week. So Houston Open, very interesting course, not the same as the Valspar and the Copperhead. It's at the Memorial. Let's touch on this. A little bit of the course stats we'll get into, but let's touch on this course instead.
Yeah, so it's par 70, 7,400 yards, around there. They tweak it a little bit, could play up to 7,500-ish, depending on where the tee boxes are. But layouts, it's got 5 par 3s, 10 par 4s, and 3 par 5s. Extremely large greens, overseeded Bermuda. It's a course that really encourages aggressive driving because the fairways are very large. Average fairway size or width is about 30 to 40 yards. We're going to get into this in our DFS plays. That's, some of these bombers off the tee are going to be really interesting plays this week because they're not really going to be able to get into much trouble. It is a long course, especially the par fours. There's a lot of par fours that are over 490 yards. And instead of like heavy rough, there's a lot of runoff areas around the greens. They're extremely shaved down. So, if you're just missing the green, it's going to run off into some, catch areas and put you in some, interesting spots below the green. But overall, it's a little bit more forgiving course than where these guys have been playing recently, which really is conducive to the scoring environment here. It's not an easy course, but scoring it's a course that can you can definitely score at. I mean, the winner last year was -20. So we're talking an average score around -5, -4, -5 every round. It's really what's going to define here this course this week is um, the long par fours and the tough par threes. The par fives, yes, guys are going to be able to get at some of those, and there's some long ones there too. But it's the long par fours. There's multiple, like the range is between 490 to 530. In a lot of these par fours. So like guys are going to have really long approach shots. Best examples, hole 14. It's a 529-yard par four. I mean, that's a par five in most courses, right? And so guys there's going to be guys hitting driver, long iron, hybrid, 3-wood, some maybe. It's definitely going to make it, par four scoring is going to be important this week. And obviously bogey avoidance. Even the par fives, like I mentioned, they're tough. There's only 3 of them. One of them is 16, and 16 actually plays historically over par. So it's not like there's no free birdies out there like on most courses. It's going to be tough. The par fours and par fives are nothing to kind of phone home about. Especially if there's some windy conditions here this week and things firm up. We might not see a -20. It could be like 2024. The scores are -12, and it was a little bit windier that week, and so this course can really toughen up a little bit around the greens and make it very difficult for these players. I'll touch on a few signature holes, which I already kind of mentioned a couple of them, but hole 16, as I mentioned, long par 5, 576 yards. It's one of the hardest par 5s on tour, only 22% birdie rate. So like that's wild. Most par 5s on tour are 50% plus. So it's going to be a huge separator late in the rounds. Guys who are able to make birdie on this hole are really going to, who knows, there could be the odd eagle. Guys who make birdie or eagle here are going to really separate themselves from the rest of the pack because there's going to be a ton of pars on this par 5, even a bogey or two. Hole 17. So this is kind of the finishing stretch. Hole 17 is a drivable par 4. Plays 405 yards, but normally it's with the wind. There's water running down the right side. And it is it's a tough hole. Plays over par as well historically, but eagles are possible and doubles are in play. So it's one that's going to be an exciting kind of hole to finish on. And then the last one I'll touch on here is hole 18, finishing par 4. It's actually 500 yards, a lot of water in play. Really demands a really strong approach shot. And this is those 3 holes really are going to decide tournaments. There's a couple of long par 4s I didn't mention, 529-yard ones and or what have you, but I think those 3 holes along with the long par 4s are really going to be what separates the group here. So anything you want to touch on any of those, Ryan? Or
Yeah, I'm just gonna get into the key stats,
yeah.
and you could go a lot of ways with some of these stats. So we labeled 3 of them, but each one kind of has like an offshoot, and you mentioned it actually a little bit. So we'll start with like strokes gained approach as being one of the key stats. And the reason why I wouldn't really break this one down too much in any particular way is you mentioned the long par 4s, and then you mentioned the short par 4s, right? Like they have a mix. And which means that your approach shots can be anywhere from 125 yards to 225 yards. And when you have like such a wide range of approach, you can't really narrow it down of what's going to be better. You're going to be playing all types of shots. So the elite iron players, long and short, will be able to score better here, right? And it kind of gets into our next stat, but the first stat is strokes gained approach. And with the larger greens that they do have and even larger fairways, you don't have to worry about like more shots out of the rough than on the fairway. You're expecting more shots out of the fairway. That strokes gained approach stat be very true here. And, with the wind and the large greens, it's going to be a challenge to get the ball close, but you're going to be hitting these greens, in strokes gained approach. One of the things is it's also landing it on the green, right? So how many strokes are you losing on your approach shot? And with the runoffs, it's kind of dangerous. So the elite ball strikers, the guys who can hold the green, especially in windy conditions, are going to prevail here, without question. So that's kind of the first one. The interesting one, next one is the long iron proximity to hole. Okay. Again, we're talking about large greens. If there's a dangerous pin placement, you can put it in the center of the green to the left, to the right, and be okay on the green. But you know that the one putt birdies are just going to be more challenging and likely not to happen. The high volume of shots that you're going to be hitting plus 175 yards is going to be significant, especially through the course of 4 rounds, right? You're going to be hitting 20 of these potentially. Right. So anybody who can get those shots closer and give themselves a chance for birdies on some of these holes where most players are just be thinking, let me get my par and get out of this and get on to the next hole. They're going to ultimately score lower than the rest if anybody can get closer to the hole. So guys that'll be going at flag sticks historically that love to, try to get to tighter pin placements, these guys will likely move up the top of the leaderboard. The scary thing is some of these guys may take more risks. So that's why, when the stack comes in, the guys are more likely to hit closer to the hole are typically guys who will end up birdieing more often.
Right.
And so you mentioned par four scoring too, right? So both those stats can kind of be broken off into like par 4 scoring average. Because the par 4s are going to be a long and more challenging to score on, it's a stat that you need to capitalize on the par 4s. There are 10 of them. Historically, there are 10 of them, on any given 10 or 11, whatever it might be. So it's a situation where these are the holes that you're going to want to score on. Long par 5s going to be challenging. Like you mentioned, one of them has 22% birdie rate, which is terrible. The par 3s are super challenging. You're going to have to score on par 4s. So that's one stat to also look at that we didn't mention, but kind of interesting to kind of follow as well. And then off strokes gained off the tee, high percentage driver usage on this course. Okay, the longer hitters will have easier approach shots. Likely they'll be closer approach shots. Guys will be able to actually place the ball maybe on more comfortable yardages, right? Getting maybe into the 150 yards out range instead of the 175 to 180 because they can hit the ball 30 yards deep. So that is going to be a very key stat, I think, off the green. So, strokes gained off the tee is important. And you also might want to look at someone who is, maybe total driving, where their accuracy and length plays a huge factor for them. So like Corey Connors as an example, not in the field this week, but he's one of those guys that can play where he hits the ball deep, but he also hits the ball very accurate. His strokes gained off tee is typically very high. So, you got to play with this a little bit. Ultimately, with a course like this, an all-around game is definitely, you could pick strokes gained tee to green, right? To cover it all. But a lot on, and notice how we didn't really touch on the putting aspect of it, right? Sure, putting is going to come into play, but a lot of guys, even if you're very good at putting and you're putting yourself that far away from the hole consistently, you're still two putting. You can be a great putter and still miss 30 footers consistently, right? There are low percentage makes on the tour, even with the best putters in the world. So I think some of these other stats kind of take over the putting. I also am a very pro ignore the putting stats for a period of time. I always like to look at the off the tee and the approach shots more frequently and the scrambling more than the putting stats. So that's kind of like, I think, a key area where we can focus on, try to pick some of our talent this week.
That's it. And I feel like on the putting side too, as much as it's a very important stat, and there are guys that are more consistent than others, there's so much more volatility. Spike weeks are going to happen. You're going to have guys who are outside the top 150 in putting who rank in the top 5 in a certain tournament any given week just because they've made a few, bombs, a couple 30, 40, 50 footers, made every putt inside 10 feet. And these guys are pros for a reason. I feel like the putting stat is a little bit more volatile, where a lot of these other stats, strokes gained approach, off the tee, that's pretty much going to stay consistent week to week. Yes, guys will still have off weeks, but a lot less volatility than in the putting metric for sure, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. So with that, who did we pick this week? You threw out a name that it seems like you're kind of like scared that you almost picked him.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a guy it's a controversial guy. I took Wyndham Clark, not just because his first name starts with the same letter as my first name, but for a multitude of different reasons. I'll be the first to say his game hasn't been in true form here this year. He's made cuts. His best, but again, it's been inconsistent. His best finish has been tied for 13. That was all the way back at the American Express. But that being said, this course layout really suits him well, though. He came tied for fifth here last year. It's a course that he's historically played well at. He's a guy who off the tee this year, actually, it's been a weak part of his game. He's just inside the top 100 strokes gained off the tee. But again, this course is going to be less of an issue for him. I think, especially if we're talking tee to green, just because of how wide the fairways are. He is a guy who can hit it quite a long way, and I think he's going to be able to put himself in positions here where his approach game is going to be able to take it to the next level. So he's actually been in the top 25 in strokes gained approach this year, which has been a part of his game that's really been saving him. And I think if he's a player that's able to hit it as far as he can and kind of, make his approaches a little bit more manageable than the rest of the field this week, I think those two things are really going to separate him from the field. Given his experience here, given his previous performance, he's going to have confidence coming into this tournament. If he's able to, keep things, going when it comes to, his putting, which has been in the top 70 this year. And again, his elite distance, I think he's a guy who's going to do quite well here this week. So, at plus 5,400, a guy who's well outside that top 10 in consensus this week. I like his game for this course and his previous experience. And so he's a guy I thought was worth taking a shot on this week in Wyndham Clark.
Yeah, I actually like where his game's at right now too. So I don't think it's that risky. He's a very smart player, and I do like the course design for him. So I like that pick. But I didn't go near Wyndham Clark. I took Ryan Gerard this week,
Yeah.
and it's funny because you said a lot of things about Wyndham Clark. Ryan Gerard kind of fits some of that, right? So like his approach to green strokes gained is 6th on tour right now, right? And that was probably the biggest driver for me was that. And then when you look at his off the tee, he's top 50. Even if you go to his putting, he's top 50. His biggest problem is around the green, but his approach play is so good that I'm expecting him to hit the green consistently this week with the larger greens and his good approach play with the wide fairways. Even off the tee, his distance I think is 88th on tour right now, so he's not a very long hitter, but his approach game's so good that I'm not worried about it. He can put it, and I think he's going to be in the fairway all tournament long. And he's just going to start dialing it in and start hitting some of these flag sticks and put himself in a good situation to make putts. So I'm very confident in Gerard's game. He started off the season so hot. He finished second at the Sony and the American Express. And then he kind of fell off, got the 45th spot, 23rd, 25th, 23rd. He missed the cut at the Arnold, but then he finished 27th at the Players. So this guy's always a top 25 performer. He on tour so far, I think 7 of his 9 starts, he's finished top 25. So I'm thinking his game is there, and his approach play is unbelievable, especially for a course like this, especially with the guys that are ranked top 5 above him. 3 of them aren't playing this week. So essentially this guy is the best iron player or best strokes gained approach player in the field this week, and that's why he's my golf guy this week.
Yeah, it's a good pick. I was going to mention his kind of elite form he's been in all year, aside from the Arnold Palmer Invitational, which you already touched on his performances. I mean, you can take a guy at plus 4,500 that's got as great of approach player as he is, and has been like he's been top 25 in every tournament except for like 2. With 2 tied for seconds, and he's very, very much in contention and had the possibility of getting a couple wins already this year too. So I think his game's in great form.
He finished top 10 last year at the Houston Open, right? So it feels like a very good play here. I've boasted on guys. Think Taylor Moore last week. I thought he had a great game for the Valspar defending champion and missed the cut. The stats say that this guy, Ryan Gerard, is one of the more elite players for this particular course, has a history here, can perform well, and likely should perform well.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, it's actually, now that we're talking about it, I do like Gerard a little bit more than I think Wyndham Clark's a little bit more not as statistically as great of a play, but we'll see how it plays out here.
Yeah, let's see. Let's see. Don't worry. I think we got some good picks here. But let's jump into the DraftKings lineup, because this is where it gets very interesting. And I like some of our picks. You know, we took one the same player, and we'll touch on him in a minute because, you know, he's on my almost shit list. But you got a couple interesting picks, and I like. You know, I think you took one of your guys similar to how I picked one of my guys that is actually a similar price range. So I want to kind of discuss why we went in that particular direction. But go ahead, start with yours, and let's go through them.
Yeah, so I mean, my lineup really is built around a lot of it's ceiling, not floor. So guys who, who have missed some cuts this year, but also had the potential to win. Heavy emphasis on strokes gained off the tee, tee to green. Really built for like a driver heavy layout like this course is, and long par four scoring. So I kind of said, okay, the guys I'm looking at are strong ball strikers, strokes gained approach, tee to green, above average drivers, capable long iron players, and can spike in putting. As we already kind of mentioned, putting is very volatile anyway, but if it spikes and those other three components are on, they're going to do really well this week. So rounding out, I guess, starting off here, Jake Knapp at 9,500. I mean, you've been on him quite a bit this year. 5 top 11 finishes so far this year. Missed the cut at the players, but his game has been so solid. Strokes gained total, he's number 2 on tour, tee to green, top 25, approach, top 60, off the tee, top 40. I mean, he's just all around an elite player this year who's had some great performances. And I think at 9,500, I mean, there was, I know things have kind of shaken up a bit with Scotty withdrawing from here, but, I liked him really more than Min Woo, Goddard, Sam Burns, even Koepka's ahead of him. So I was like, hey, listen, I think I can get a guy at a value here that's playing quite well this year and save some money over, all of those other guys. And so it was kind of for me, a no-brainer take Jake Knapp, just based on how he's been performing and is set up to this course. After Jake, I really went with a guy here that's, again, my guy, Wyndham Clark. I already kind of mentioned all the reasons why I took him here. The main one was tied for 5th last year at this tournament, and how his game really suits well for this course when it comes to, his being above average driver, strokes gained off the tee historically, maybe not this year, but historically he's been really well there. His approach has been really strong this year in the top 25. His putting's really let him down. But I think with that volatility and given his course fit, he has a potential to be like an elite tier play here this week and really outperform his 8,300 salary. So that's why I took Wyndham Clark. We'll jump down to Keith Mitchell at 8,200. He's made every cut he's played in this year. He hasn't really played super well in any of them. Like, he's got a lot of the 45th place finishes. Best finish was tied for 6th at the Cognizant Classic. But off the tee, he's 10th on tour. Approach, he's top 35. Around the greens, he's terrible. I think he's 110th or something like that. Putting, he's been very bad as well. But again, looking at the profiles I was looking at, given his, ball is strong off, off the tee strokes gained to play, as well as ball striking combo. Like, he's a guy, I think really he's got that classic kind of Memorial Park profile, driver heavy, long par 4 player who his game really suits this course well. And so at that 8,200 mark, I thought he was a great value play here for this course. And that's kind of why I grabbed Keith Mitchell there in that spot. Moving down to my 4th pick, Jason Day at 8,000. And as you can tell, my lineup's pretty balanced. A lot of guys, took a lot of guys, one guy in the mid 9s and a bunch in the low 8s, and then a couple high 7s. All these guys I felt like had really good shots at winning, and I didn't want to kind of jump too far off the board. But Jason Day is a guy who he's been a bit streaky this year. Best finish, tied for 2nd at American Express. Missed back-to-back cuts at the Genesis and Arnold Palmer. He then finished tied for 59th at the Players. But he shot an 80 in round 4, where had he shot even par, he would have finished top 15 at the Players. So he had one bad round that really, unfortunately hurt him quite a bit at the Players. But this guy, I mean, he's a top 40 play in strokes gained total. His putting is elite. His approach play is elite, both in the kind of top 30 and top 50 respectively. He's a much more balanced profile than the other guys. He's not a huge bomber. That being said, his bogey avoidance is elite. His approach play is elite, and around the green strength is kind of what's really going to, I think, make him a good play here this week at this. He doesn't make a lot of bogeys, a very stable pick. And I think at 8,000, like, you need a stable guy who you really feel good about. He's got the potential to win, but he's a guy that I'm very confident is going to make the cut now. And really, I think he's a top 25 play here this week easily. So after him, I went with a guy. We've been on him quite a bit this year, especially on courses that like this one that have been open where you can kind of bomb it. So, Taylor Pendrith, a little bit of an inconsistent year too with him, right? But he's one of the best drivers on tour. Started the year strong. He also came tied for 5th here last year. So it kind of shows his game is really suited well for this course. He's top 45 guy, elite, off the tee, distance heavy player. Strokes gain approach, he's top 60. What's interesting about him that nobody talks about, he's actually top 11 in strokes gain scrambling. So it's a sneaky part of his game because everyone's like, oh, he's so long, he's so long, he's so long. But his scrambling and ability to get up and down has been very elite this year. And so if you put like those two together, like off the tee, if he gets in some trouble with his approach play, he's a guy that he's going to figure it out and get up and down for par, or make it so he's not really making some of those big numbers. So he's again one of the best pure drivers in the field this week. The advantage with the fairways being wide is going to be huge for him. And I think at 7,900, I mean, like, this might be the best value play in my opinion in DraftKings this week. I thought he was a great pick that I really liked in that 7,900 range. Rounding my game out was with a guy that he was almost kind of on my bench earlier on in the year because I did take Tony a few times. I kind of was looking at guys in the 7,600 range because I did kind of wait and just see what I had left over here. I could have went as high as 8,100. So Hogard was on my list, Pearson Coody, Molly, Aaron Rai, the Gala was there again, but after last week, I really just had a bad taste in my mouth, even though this course suits him much better, which I know you're going to talk about. But I said, you know what? Like, I'm going to go with a guy who I really like this week based on his history at this course. He's a guy who, his game's been trending in the right direction. 2 top 20 finishes in the last 4 starts, including his most recent, which was tied for 18th at Valspar. He's another guy who plays really well at courses that don't punish you for errant tee shots, which I think that's really gonna help him here with the wide fairways. Strong strokes gain approach and off the tee combo here. He's got proven success at this course. I believe he won it in 2022, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to look that up and not just say it off the cuff here, but I'm pretty sure he's won this tournament before. As you're going through yours, yes, he won it in 2022, dropped minus 16. So again, he's got a lot of great course history here, and I think that course history part of his game is elite. And then kind of with his strokes gain approach and off the tee combo, I thought he was a great pick at 7,600, and so that's kind of why I took him over some of those other guys to round out my team this week.
Yeah, solid team. And I'm going to touch on Pendrith in a second because he was on my radar and I had to make some decisions on who I was going to take. And Pendrith, like you mentioned, his game, honestly, I think it fits this course so well. I really liked him. And, so I'll get into mine. And I decided to work backwards a little bit this week. So I kind of started at the bottom. And, I was picking while, Scotty was still in the lineup. So I was wondering if I could fit a Scotty lineup in with some of the guys lower down, and I couldn't. But so I still started to work backwards. And the first guy that I ran into was Yella Marju. Okay, so I actually did a lot of research on this guy for something else I was doing. This guy doesn't have a coach. He is self-taught, watching YouTube videos of Tiger and Rory and Phil. So fantastic player. He finished top 5 at the Players. That was his last event. He actually has had 4 out of 5 cuts, his last 5 cuts made. He started off the year at the Sony actually playing very well. And rookie on tour, but playing fantastic golf. So I'm looking at him to continue his hot streak. There's not very many areas to get into too much trouble here. So I think that he can perform well here. I like his game where he's at. I like his confidence where it's at. So I'm kind of riding on that. I usually don't do this. I don't take rookies on tour that often. No history at the course essentially. But Right now, if I'm taking a guy that is currently on a heater, I'm taking Yella Marju. I think he's going to perform well. So I'm going to take a flyer on him. He's the guy I like the most down, like lower down. And then I ran into Ryan Fox. So Ryan Fox is interesting. I didn't like him. And, I was watching, I think it was Pebble Beach, and he was playing with Rory. And I was like, oh, they got this like, not so well known name playing with Rory at Pebble Beach was a little strange. And he played fantastic. He finished top 24. Then he went to the Genesis, finished top 7, or finished tied for 7th. And then he finished top 24. His last 5 starts, all top 25 finishes. Okay, with one top 10 in there. So I'm really liking where his game's at, right? He's had a bit of time off. He's gone 3 weeks without playing. But I really and I like the fact that he can get eagles, and he's a big birdie maker, right? Makes a lot of birdies. Every single event this year, except for every single event this year, he's out birdied his bogeys. So he is a minus player. He is always hitting better than par. So, and even then, if you look, actually, I think he's had 1 round over par in the entire season.
That's impressive.
Okay. So I really, if a guy's going to be $7,400, like Ryan Fox is, and he plays this consistently well, give me a guy that's going to, be, yeah, sure, -1, -2 at his worst, and then see if he can get to a -5, -6 on any given round, and you get him in the -10 to 15 range, and that at this course, that's a winning score, right? That's a top 5 score. So Ryan Fox was fun to pick. I really like him. I'm riding on his most recent performances. Also last year, Ryan Fox also finished top 25 at this event. So again, some history there as well. So I kind of went on that. It kind of in both Yella Marju and Ryan Fox. I didn't really kind of look too much into the stats. I was kind of looking at guys that had played well recently. Even for Ryan Fox's situation, has history here and plays well. So those are my bottom 2 picks, but they were my first 2 picks. And then I could start to work my lineup from there. And actually, I went back to the top because, like you mentioned, when you go to the top of the thing, you got Goddard and Burns and Koepka and Fowler, Adama and Nikolai Hogard, which I'm a big fan of Hogard, right? And then the 2 players that I took, so I knew that I had 7,200, 7,400 taken. I knew I had room for 2 of the 9,000 players, right? And the 2 guys I liked the most was Minwoo Lee, defending champion here. Now, last week when I took a defending champion, it didn't work out so well for me. But Minwoo Lee has played fantastic all year long. He's top 10 in strokes gained tee to green. His strokes gained off the tee is fantastic. His stroke gains approach is a little more shaky, but honestly, I think that he can overcome that. And again, shaky by meaning top 50, right? Where he's still beating, he's still the 75 percentile of the tour. So I really like his game. He's been playing fantastic. So Minwoo Lee is going to be my anchor on this one, and in this situation, yeah, do I want a repeat performance from last year? For sure. But at minimum, do I want him to finish in a top 5 position? Yeah, and I think he can do it with his game. You talked about Jake Knapp, and this is my last warning for Jake Knapp. Okay. Perform well for me, and I'll keep you on the squad. And if you don't, you're just going to ride the bench the rest of the year because, he came off the withdrawal from the illness, went straight playing the week after at the Players and misses the cut. He's taken a week off and he's back again. So I'm hoping that, whatever illness he had that was ever lingering for him, he's over it. And, he can come back to his form, like you mentioned, 5 or 6 top 11 finishes, other than that one time he was cut, he's been in the top 11. So someone like that should definitely perform well here. Great golfer. So Jake Knapp was almost a lock for me in his final warning. Ryan Gerard, I mentioned Ryan Gerard, fantastic iron player, $8,400. It was fun. Like when I got down to it, and you look at some of the 8,000 guys that were on my list, and Michael Thorbjornsen, really like his game. Could have taken him. Lowry's there, and I've been on high on Lowry from the start of the season. Lowry's problem is he's iron game is actually very good, and he just can't make birdies. He is struggling this year to make birdies, and it's like he picks it up one round, and the next round it's just gone again. So kind of wary on him. Could have went with him Clark. I really liked him. I definitely like Gerard more than I like Clark. Obviously, comparison my golf guy, I do like Gerard more than I like Wyndham. Keith Mitchell was fun. I've been high on Keith Mitchell a lot this year, and I've avoided taking him just because, some of the stats that you've mentioned, he's not strong in every single category. He's got some weaknesses. So I left him off the list. Again, Gerard just outweighed a lot of these guys. I could have went as high as Ben Griffin or Harris English, but I didn't really want to go that high. It would have put me back down into the lower end of the 7,000s, which I've already been through because that's who I picked first. So I decided to change it up a bit. And then it left me with one guy. And I was trying to see if I could go further down, like a Pearson Coody or Stevens, where I could get Pendrith and somebody else. And I didn't like it that much as taking Gerard, that is. So I took a guy very similar to Pendrith, in a fun way, which was Tagala, right? A guy that's going to bomb it off the tee. He's going to give himself chances for eagles on par fives, which scores well in DraftKings. Listen, he put up a dud last week, but on a course that wasn't fit for him. So I'm hoping that he can turn this around. He scrambles well. He great off the tee, and not great off the tee from a strokes gained off the tee, more from a distance off the tee. And there, I think he's going to be able to get in better positions to score better, especially with these large greens. I'm confident in his ability to put up good scores. Listen, is he going to bogey a lot of holes? Please. I'm just hoping he's going to eagle and birdie more, right? And you give me a top 25 performance with multiple eagles, that's going to be a deciding factor, right? You give it someone else a top 25 without the eagles and birdies, and someone who's going to be very consistent swapping eagles for bogeys for birdies. That guy's not going to score as well as somebody like Tagala and DraftKings. It makes it a very promising or hopeful look at what he can possibly do at this particular course.
Yeah, no, I like your lineup, and I really like the strategy too. I mean, it's something that a lot of people don't do is go bottom first. Identify those guys who you feel you like that are be in the high sixes, low sevens, and build out your lineup from the bottom up rather than the top down, where you then get forced into a few picks that maybe you don't like as much. This way you were able to really, you knew you were able to take Minwoo Lee and Jake Knapp, who you liked a lot, rather than taking both of them. Your lineup might have finished the same, but just kind of works out this way and is a lot better. I find it's I always tend to, like, for me, and I think I mentioned this before, I tend to take the guys I like at the top, then go to the bottom, then fill in the middle normally, which also works for me. Obviously, we have not. It's one of those things where it's got to be kind of what you like. But I also am a huge advocate, and I said it before, of trying to not max out my salary, which I like this week. I didn't. I think I'm going to have a lineup that is quite different than a lot of other people. And I think you get into that position, especially when you go top down, where you're just filling it in and that you automatically max out your salary. Again, everyone's got their own strategy, and I mean, mine hasn't really been working this year, so take it with a grain of salt. But these are just kind of different ideas of how you can approach building out your lineup and how we typically do. I will say I have not had to redeposit since the start of the year, so that is a plus. I have won somewhere to get my bankroll back up to where it was, where I haven't had to redeposit here on our $5 tournaments that we're entering. I'll take that for what you will.
Yeah, and one thing interesting, if you look at our lineups, from Jake Knapp, we went down to, from the 9,500 to the 84, 83 range, right? There's 10 golfers in that range where, let's say, did we overlook them, or was it just our strategy to not take them because of, we also took nobody in the 6,000 range, which I think is the first time so far this year that neither one of our lineups holds a $6,000 player.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that too. Like, I really didn't like the guys in the 6,000s this week. I mean, I think because the tournament isn't as strong of a field, the guys in the sixes are not great this week. There's guys, I'm looking through here. I mean, the only guy that stands out to me was SH Kim was one guy
Yeah.
who I like. He was at what's he at? He's at 6,900. Benson, maybe he could be a good pick. He's pretty good off the tee. I didn't really like
And
any
you
of
got
them.
Lipsky coming off a good week. He's
Yeah,
down there still, right? Like there are
I think.
guys that Kiefer, good
Yeah,
player. Putnam's down there. We've been high on him all year. But and if you look at, and I looked at some of these guys, Hoagie, I love Hoagie. They just haven't been playing consistent. If you look at the cuts made, they're hitting around the 50% cuts made. Even
yeah,
if you look at their like average fantasy points, they're 50, 60 fantasy points on average, right? And that's because they don't make a lot of cuts. So there's a lot of risk down there.
yeah.
And I agree. I looked at them and I kind of like, I don't know if I like any of these guys. And if Scotty was still in the tournament, it would have been very interesting, what kind of lineup with Scotty could have been made and how difficult it would have been to put up a winner with him in your lineup this week.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I think that's kind of where you would have had to go to the sixes, right? You take Scotty, then you would have had to kind of fill in some of those holes, and some of the guys in sixes might have been more attractive then. But I think with our more balanced lineups,
Yeah.
we just didn't have to, and we didn't like the guys there because of consistency reasons, like you mentioned. And I'm pretty happy with my lineup. I think I'm going to be tough to beat this week, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, we say this about each other's lineups all the time. Yeah, you did great. Mine's better. And then, so far we're swapping who's better and who's worse. You just got a few more points. And it's my withdrawals. My withdrawals are killing me. It
Mine's
killed
the
you
better
early,
of
but it's
the
been killing me.
mine's the better of the bad lineups. Both lineups are bad, but mine's the better of the bad.
There you go, listeners. There, you're getting the better of the bad lineups when listening to this podcast.
Yeah, yeah. The true value that we can bring here.
All right. Well, listen, everybody, enjoy the week that is. A Scotty-less tournament now. So pretty much up for anybody. And wish us luck and good luck on your lineups as well.
Yeah, best of luck, everybody. Have a great week.